My name is Betty Johnson, and I'm an author, and I have just published a memoir of my life that was, I want to say it was life-changing. And this memoir is called An Uncommon Education. And this is me at that time, and I'm going to tell you what my life-changing education was. I grew up in Texas. At that time there was segregation. There was a lot of bigotry in my family and where I lived, and I was a very naive young woman. And when I was 23, I was living in Houston, Texas at the time, and I had an opportunity to fulfill a dream that I had had since I was a little girl. Because when I was a little girl, I would pore over these ads for traveling all over the world to go on a tour here and a trip there, and I wanted to see the world. And the opportunity came when I read a little article in Houston newspaper that the State Department and the Foreign Service Branch were in town recruiting clerical workers for overseas assignments in the Foreign Service. So on my lunch hour, I went to the hotel where they were. I filled out forms, I took all kinds of things, went to the FBI, was fingerprinted, and that was in April of 1952. And I went back and I just continued on with my life, and then in July I received a telegram. We didn't have internet or emails at that time, so I was using the telegram aspect of this. And they were offering me a position as a code clerk, and I had no idea what a code clerk was. So I went, I'm going to say I answered and said, yes, I will take it. And in August, I traveled by train to Washington, D.C. for 3 months training. I had never been out of Texas that far in all my life. I want you to know, and to go by train and looking through, and I felt so sophisticated, but I didn't even know what sophistication was at the time. And when I arrived in Washington, I went into training, and I learned that I was learning how to encode and decode classified messages. I had a top secret clearance. So there I was, training, and when I got my assignment in October, I didn't quite know how to feel, because it was Paris, France. And so here I was, coming from a very naive young woman from Texas, and going to Paris. It was my uncommon education, because I received quite an education. And it was a time of, we were 7 years past World War II. And I'll tell you right now I'm 82 years old, or 82 years young. And I went to Paris. And I traveled with another young woman who had been in training with me. And I'm going to read you a portion of what it was like when I left the airport and I was coming into Paris. And this is what I saw and felt. So, of course, I do have to have my glasses. I mean, after all, I'm a young woman at heart. And this is what happened. It was the middle of October. In fact, it was October the 16th, 1952. I remember wearing a tweed suit topped with a navy blue beret with a long partridge feather rising upward out of one side. I felt chic and elegant. I was also wearing my alligator ankle strap, high heels, and carrying my matching handbag. In those days, women usually wore hats and dresses or suits. If we did not wear gloves, we carried them. The era of women wearing long pants had not arrived in the early 1950s. The bus ride from the airport into Paris is one of the most memorable memories I have. The morning air was brisk, and one could call it a gray day, with the sky overcast and no hint of the sun. All buildings appeared to be made of dirty, ancient gray stone. I realized later that the buildup of the dirt came from over hundreds of years, and now we're experiencing the exhaust of vehicles. The trees along the wide boulevards were semi-stripped of their foliage, with the leaves now turning into various colors drifting to the ground. I fortunately managed to have a window seat, and I pressed my nose to the window with my heart pounding with excitement. I was at last in a foreign country, and my heart was beating rapidly at the thought of my dream coming to pass. There were many people riding bicycles or zipping in and out between automobiles on motor scooters, also known as mopeds or Vespas. The women tucked their skirts under them so the skirts would not fly up to reveal their underwear. It seemed that most men wore navy blue berets, and keeping my nose pressed to the bus window, I observed people coming from the bakeries, and I later learned that these were called boulangeries, carrying unwrapped long and slender loaves of bread. Some carried bottles of wine or groceries in string bags. I was fascinated. I was even more amazed at the small children carrying wine bottles home from the wine stores. And the following is from my first letter home. And this is what I wrote in a letter. The women wore buns, colorless clothes, and black stockings. The men all wore berets, and the little boys were dressed in very short pants with knee-length stockings, and some of them wore aprons. We found out later that they all wear them when playing. I was intrigued the first time I saw a city bus. All of them were packed with passengers and overflowing out onto the platform. At the rear of the bus, I had never seen a bus with an open platform in the rear. I became aware that every intersection without a red light had a traffic police officer called a gendarme directing traffic. The gendarme blew a whistle while one of his arms first waved to the right, then to the left, before moving to a hand pointing to the rear. I was realizing I was in a vastly different world from whence I had come. The air rang with a cacophony of sounds from all the many vehicles on the street, playing a melody of out-of-tune notes, and yet, in one sense, there was harmony. And that was my introduction to Paris.